As a trans woman, would you have any objection to Linda Bellos, who we saw in that piece, coming and talking at a university or college?
Look, I don't want to bash Linda. I quite like Linda. She bought me a first-class rail ticket a year ago because we were on the same train, but she was travelling in rather more style than me. I think that what she said is pretty crass and offensive, to be honest. But I just think these students are maybe, getting a bit carried away, and I think that everybody's just making such a big fuss over it and just getting triggered over trigger warnings, really. And
but let me just push you, because clearly you would not approve of a university inviting someone who was violently anti-trans and was of the kind of trans don't exist or they shouldn't be allowed to exist or anything like that. Where would you draw the line? I mean, you would certainly allow people who disagree with you on trans issues, right, to come in. You recognise that people who disagree with you are allowed to come and speak, or should be allowed to come and speak?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends what they disagree on. If we're having a conversation about how to keep, litter down or how to keep the trains running on time, but if your opinion is just, trans women are rapists, or, trans women are perverts, or you're not who you say you are, or, gay people are a threat to children, I mean, that's not really an opinion, is it? It's just abuse. So for me, I draw the line at hate speech. And Germaine Greer, for instance, has a very long history of implying that trans women are sexual predators, which I think is really inflammatory. It's hate speech, and I think it's beyond the pale, and I think it's really good that people are pushing back against this, because the really important thing to express here is the fact that there've always been things that people haven't felt that they could say in society. So 50 years ago, people didn't feel that they could say that they were gay. 50 years ago, people didn't, well, 20 years ago, when I was a kid, didn't feel that I could express myself and say that I was trans. So actually, we're redrawing the boundaries on what
the boundaries in all
is and
sorts
isn't
of ways.
acceptable expression.
Nick, Germaine Greer, no platforming. Where would you draw the line? You have a line. You accept there's a line.
My line would be closer to where the law is, and I think I would also think about the intellectual realm of a university differently to some of the social functions of a university. So there should be something in the lecture hall that is sometimes unsafe. What universities are doing, to a certain degree, are taking people apart intellectually and putting them together again, because going to university is part of a really important transition in your life. So absolutely I think the law is drawn in rather sensible place on lots of these things. However, it is absolutely true that if you ask, for example, trans students, lesbian, gay students, some BME groups of students, well-being questions, for example, they find life tougher on campus. But often those problems, they're not, by and large, happening in the classroom. There are other things going on in their lives and other things going on in a university, which means they haven't always got the support they want. But that is different to the intellectual challenge of what goes on at university.
Josh, you're a Cambridge student.
Absolutely.
Now, tell us where you would draw the line, or whether you recognise
I think we have to take an absolute holistic approach, because I think, as you were rightly saying, students have a lot going on in their lives, and some students, we don't know what they have suffered. We do not know. Particularly recently, there's been the Me Too phenomenon on social media, where women have been posting about their experiences of sexual assault, and obviously in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein allegations, some women are brave enough to come forward, others aren't, because it's just so hard for them to talk about. And I think why we have trigger warnings, why we talk about safe spaces, is to make it easier to have these discussions, so people don't feel that they have to be silent, so people don't feel like they have to keep everything inside out of fear of ridicule, out of fear of being dismissed. So I think it's up to us to draw the line where we think it's necessary. There is no objectively fixed line,
but
it's
true. But OK, so a question, and the points have been well made. The question is, sometimes if you draw a line too close to where you are, you just go into extremes, or you basically push the line into an unreasonable place. Now, Kate, you're a comedian.
Yes.
Tell us about your your disinvitation to perform at Goldsmiths College, because this was an interesting...
This is a few years ago, but I was asked to perform at Goldsmiths College, which I had done every year up until that point. It was pretty routine for me to tour my solo show there. And then suddenly, the day before, they said, well, there might be a protest, so we're going to cancel. And I said, well, OK, what are they going to protest? And actually, initially, they weren't very clear. I mean, firstly, it's kind of ridiculous, because none of the subjects which they were suggesting they might be upset about were mentioned in my show. I wasn't going to talk about any of these issues. It's like Paris was saying, if we're going to talk about picking up litter, then, let's just ask what their opinions are about that. But also, they were then unwilling to really give me the details, and they were like, "Well, you might breach our safe space policy." It's also ridiculous because
but
if you've seen my work,
it was about, just to cut to it, it was about your views on prostitution differed from the university, the student union's official view on prostitution.
That is one of the stories that I heard. Later, I was told it was about Islam. I've heard both cases made. They said that I couldn't be allowed on campus because I had in the past been critical of the sex industry, but I think that's sort of odd. I'm not critical of individuals making difficult choices. I've only ever been critical I'm also critical, for the record, of the oil industry, you know, the food industry, they're pretty much the textile industry. And then when it came to Islam, that I had criticised those countries where veiling is compulsory for women. And they said, well, that might be offensive to people who choose to wear the veil. And I was like, no, it's to force people to do one thing or another is offensive to everybody, and I'm against it.
I'm interested in how you respond to that experience, Paris.
Well, you know, Kate, I can't help but listen to this, but feel it's a little bit like calling the kettle black. I mean, didn't you put your name to a campaign to have comedians that make rape jokes banned from comedy gigs in 2012? So, you know, if you're all for this sort of thing, apart from when it's for you. And I think that actually, if you got a big enough group of people together who wanted to come and see you speak at Goldsmiths, you could probably go and speak there tomorrow, because Germaine Greer had a really big load of people who wanted to come and see her. There was a campaign against her, and her talk went ahead. But there weren't that many people that were booked in. There weren't that many people booked in for your show.
Well, OK, first of all, that's a really nasty lie.
OK,
let me finish my sentence, please, Paris. No, I'm sorry, it's not OK to accuse me of things that just aren't true. The lie about
Goldsmiths have accused.
May I please finish my sentence? I will walk out of this studio if I'm not allowed to finish.
I'd like you to finish.
The thing about ticket sales is a lie made up after the event by Goldsmiths Student Union. The event was supposed to be free and tickets were not on sale. Students could just walk in. They'd set up a system where people from outside who wanted to come, even though they were not really part of the invited crowd, could come, and a few people had done so. After the event, they claimed, because only a few had signed up, that it wasn't a popular event. But actually, and I screenshot the whole conversation I had, they had said to me directly that they were expecting 50 to 100 people. That is on my blog. The screenshots are all there. It's absolutely proven. So that is a complete lie. But let's talk about the rape joke thing.
Because you do basically think that some things should be no platformed. I mean, you're not a sort of...
Well, I absolutely do think that those who incite violence shouldn't be platformed. But when it comes to things like the rape joke thing, I'm not actually in the world of saying, let's disinvite people, let's change things. What I'm actually part of is a campaign that says, hey, people who programme comedy clubs book great acts that don't do racist, sexist, misogynist, unpleasant material. And I think that's very different to say who you book in the first place. Let's have balanced bills, mixed bills, and a range of really good comedy, not out-of-date, sexist, homophobic rubbish.
Joshua, do you recognise it sometimes goes too far? Now, there was an Oxford College Balliol that basically said it didn't want the Christian Union at the Freshers' Fair. This is just a few weeks back. See that. And I mean, there are a lot of people who just think this is the world gone mad. You know, that's wholly unreasonable and very bigoted.
I can understand, because some people, you know, they're coming from a kind of different generation, they're coming from a different angle, where things which for them they've been able to discuss freely, now we feel that we have to say, OK, no, we want to re-examine it. Because obviously, you know, once upon a time, if I wanted to say God isn't real, they would, you know, say that I was crazy or something like that.
Quite a long time ago.
So, but the boundaries change. I suppose, obviously, saying is ever something too extreme. I think there are examples which, personally, perhaps I may disagree with, but I think it's about actually saying that we are kind of grown up to say, actually, we don't want this here. It's not saying that we can never have, like, you know, Christians or Muslims speak wherever. It's just saying in certain spaces we draw the line at, you know, at this place.
Nick, I want to bring Nick in.
Well, I think the problem is that we sometimes forget how very young, for example, a new undergraduate is, 18. They tend not to have thought about these issues in the depth, even though we're doing this studio tonight. And I think it should be, you know, it should be part of Freshers' Week, a conversation like this, because when I mean, we've polled students, and students are very confused on these issues. You know, they love free speech. They also love trigger warnings. They love free, safe spaces. They want, a quarter of them want UKIP entirely banned from British university campuses. In a poll we did before the referendum. So, you know, where these debates are limiting the core functions of a university to educate and push forward knowledge.
Is your worry, Nick, that we end up like the United States? Because some of these are very fraught debates in the United States.
Yeah, yes, I do worry. I mean, you know, most of these examples, like the Balliol one, they're one-off, and when you delve down, you find there's some other angles to it. But But yes, I do worry about that, because if you can't have these debates on a university campus where you've got expertise, you've got resources, you've got time, you've got people who are willing to debate them out, frankly, where can you have them except in studios like this?
OK, I'd really like to just pick you up on a point that you said. Could you provide one concrete example of where this problem of trigger warnings and stuff has led to a university not being able to carry out its core work? Because I'm just not seeing it. I'm just thinking, oh, this could happen, and it's like the sky's going to fall in. But
we heard one or two academics on the film talking about how it changes your lecture planning, it changes how you approach the class, and you teach the courses in different ways to how you've done it in the past. Some of these things are quite hard to prove. I absolutely accept that. But as I say, if a university can't have these debates, where else can they happen?
Well, no, and I do worry. I'm saying that they can't have the debate.
I do worry that it has adverse consequences, because it drives things underground. I mean, as I say, universities were shocked by the referendum result quite often. That was sometimes because these really open debates about something quite straightforward, should we be in the EU or not, was not happening on campus. And when you get into more difficult territory, it happens with knobs on, so to speak.
I wonder whether there's a big generational thing here. I mean, what's your view, Kate? It does feel like there is a generation for whom the freedom of speech issue is very different to the kind of meaning that was often put on it by an older generation, isn't there?
To be honest with you, I think that we've had this. I think that this has been in existence all along. We just use different words for it. We've always had a conversation about who should be invited to speak at different events, and I think it's absolutely fine to have that conversation. And personally, I would kind of draw the line at incitement to violence. But at the same time, if you're going to have a conference about sexual assault, well, you don't want to invite Harvey Weinstein and Ched Evans to that conference, because obviously that's not appropriate. But there's a difference between drawing that line around a conference specifically about that and saying that you can't have people even on campus if they've ever expressed a term that you don't find comfortable. There's obviously got to be like a different line drawn, and I think that what's different these days, to be honest, is that the right-wing press like to find one little incident and make a big fuss about it. And I have to say, although I'm cross about being no platform from Goldsmiths, I also think, hold on, some students made a decision. They were trying to keep other students safe. I think they made a foolish and wrong decision. But isn't that the point of being a student? Make some bad decisions, learn from it, move on. Great.
If I might make a very quick issue, you were saying about incitement to violence can take different forms, particularly with mental health. As we rightly saw in the video, trans people, people of colour, have some of the worst suicide rates in the country, and hearing these things can cause very violent, adverse reactions.
I need to curtail the free speech of all of you right now. We've overrun our time. So, look, thank you all very much indeed. Thanks.